Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our YouTube channel. I know you've all been dying to hear our thoughts on the final Nolan Batman film.
And much like its title, we too are rising from the ashes.
Are we
Rising? It's
falling?
been a while.
I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, let's get this out of the way. Who is involved in the making of The
I
Dark
don't
Knight
know
Rises?
who could be involved in this
I
movie.
think I know at least a few of the names.
Obviously, again, directed by Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
Screenplay by Chris and his brother Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
Story by Chris and David Esquire, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Starring Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, Anne Hathaway, Tom Hardy as Bane, Marion Cotillard, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Morgan Freeman. Score this time just by Hans Zimmer.
Mm-hmm.
This movie was released July 20th of 2012. Has a runtime of 2 hours and 44 minutes.
Yeah, it does.
With a budget of somewhere between 250 and 300 million, and it made a little over $1 billion at the box office.
All right, well, it wasn't a flop.
What wasn't a flop?
Yeah, I think the general consensus of The Dark Knight Rises is that it is the lesser of the three.
Definitely the lesser of the three, but I think most people still consider it a pretty decent movie.
I think it varies. I hear some people love to trash it. Some people are like, it's still a pretty good movie. But yeah, coming back to this time, I remember that it was long.
Yeah, it's definitely been a minute since I've seen this one. It's probably the Dark Knight trilogy movie I've seen the least out of the three.
I would say yes.
And it's been a couple 2 or 3 years since I've seen it. I think
Probably the same for me. It's probably been over. I'd say at least.
It's definitely been over a year
or so. But I'll say this. I think that it definitely has problems.
It does have problems. But I think it's still an entertaining movie.
I still think it's a good superhero movie. I mean, obviously, the problems like everybody I'm sure talks about. One, it is too long.
It is very long. At 2 hours and 45 minutes, it does drag at points.
I know that Nolan loves his long movies, but I think you could probably cut at least a half hour out of this movie. And that length results in some bad pacing. I think we said it was about 45 minutes before he puts on the suit.
It's about 45 minutes before he puts on the cape and cowl. He has his confrontation with Bane where he gets his back broken at 111-ish. Gets thrown in the pit at around 120, 115, 120, somewhere in there. And he doesn't come out of that pit for 40 minutes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of this movie that goes without Batman, or at least without him in the Batman suit.
So, there's, I guess, a little over, about an hour and 20 with no Batman in a 2 hour and 40 minute movie. So over half, a little over about half.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan always, like I felt with the first two especially, he always the scripts were really tight. He tried to make sense out of everything. I think there are some holes and some logic leaps you got to make with this one. I think, for one thing, for starters, I think one of the earlier things is this idea. We have Selena Kyle in this film, played by Anne Hathaway, Catwoman, obviously. And she's after this quote-unquote clean slate program. And at one point, she gets to the guy that's supposed to have it, and he's like, yeah, it sounds a little too good to be true, right? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, she's kind of dumb for thinking that something like that exists. But then at the end of the movie, it turns out it does exist, I guess, because Bruce Wayne has it on a thumb drive.
Wayne has it,
I guess.
Even though that guy specifically says, coincidentally, he's played by Ben Mendelsohn, the guy that we're talking about, which is really funny. I forgot he was in this movie. Actually.
Yeah, me too.
He's like, it was Anne Hathaway's character, Selena Kyle, was talking about how she knows the company that had it was in prototype phases or something like that. And Ben Mendelsohn's like, yeah, I bought it, so they couldn't continue working on it. And then somehow, miraculously, Bruce Wayne has it on a thumb drive.
Yeah, that never really goes explained, but whatever. And I think the biggest
plot hole
issue, and not just plot hole, but biggest just kind of pit, pun intended, of this film is this whole prison sequence. For one thing, they try to sell it as like the literal pit of hell, but I feel like he could have done a lot more visually to portray it like that way, because when Bruce Wayne gets down there, they have fluorescent lights, they got a TV. Now, I don't think they say this directly. I think that Bane put that TV there just for him, but so they have running electricity in this pit. Like,
and they have some water source of some sort.
They had food and water of some. If they really wanted to sell this, I think they should have just literally had a pit, because there's actually like jail cells and stuff built into this thing. They should have just had a pit with a bunch of people stuck at the bottom that maybe they occasionally got food and water dumped down on top of them or something. And the way it's portrayed, it's like it's a prison underground.
So it's a prison in this deep hole.
Yeah, it's not as bad as at least visually, it doesn't sell to me that it's as bad as they try to make it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the running thing in the whole movie, you know, about how this child born in literal pit of hell just escaped and became.
Now, but maybe Bane had some. Maybe he overhauled it, and that's why they have like electricity and stuff. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, then the plot hole,
and they also, you know, we're talking about it. I mean, they have. I mean, not necessarily great living conditions, but they have cots and beds of some sort, some form of way to sleep. I mean, if it was really that bad, I mean, they'd be sleeping on the ground. And they seem
to have pretty free reign.
And they had a medical doctor at one point in time.
There's cells, but they don't seem to be locked or anything.
No, they don't seem to be locked. There doesn't seem to be any guards out there being like, all right, you can't try to climb out of the pit.
Yeah, just near climb. And then speaking of climbing out of the pit, another plot hole or leap of logic that you got to make here is that it's all about the spirit. Like, the fact that he is a fully grown, super fit man does not allow him to make the same jump that some little bitty tiny girl made when she was like 12 or whatever.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, whatever.
The biggest gap in logic in this entire movie. It's very clearly established. Mm-hmm. The entire city is blocked off and closed off. Mm-hmm. Bridges closed off. Tunnels closed off. How did he get in?
How did he get to Gotham? Like, he doesn't have any resources. He can't take a plane.
He doesn't have a phone. He can't be like, yo, Alfred's in the private jet.
Yeah.
How to get back to Gotham and how to get in?
And I think, you can make all kinds of assumptions, but you know, Christopher Nolan, for someone who is so known for messing with time and doing all that, I think the portrayal of the passage of time in the third act of this movie
flawed.
Is really bad. We're supposed to believe from the dialogue that this occurs over a 5-month period.
Roughly,
which,
yeah. So
first of all,
the bomb when it's first established that this bomb or this reactor is turned into this nuclear bomb, it has 5 minutes before or 5 minutes, five months before it completely decays essentially and will blow up.
Yeah, and I mean logic issues I have with that. Like, I know they try to explain this away, but I have a hard time believing that the U.S. government would allow this to go on for 5 months. And, like, the special forces...
At least 4 months, because the special forces show up about a month left before...
Yeah, they say, like, 23 days left. I'm like, so it took them 4 months to sneak special forces in? What? Yeah, I just think Nolan... And, I'm sure if Nolan had to defend... I haven't watched any interviews or anything. If Nolan had to defend, like, how he got to Gotham, he could say, well, he escaped the prison with this many days left, so you can assume he maybe hitched a ride on a cargo ship or something and got it. But yeah, I think it's fair.
The lapse in time, the way they make it seem is like he climbs out of this pit, and then miraculously, like the same day, shows up in Gotham.
Yeah,
but I guess really it's not. It's not established what day, how many days left until he gets out of the pit. Yeah. But he shows up, and there's roughly a day, 12 hours to a day left before this thing blows up. Yeah. And the real final battle doesn't start until there's 45 minutes left until it detonates.
Yeah, so whatever, I guess.
It's casual. Definitely very flawed timeline.
And
here.
Another issue I have, I hate to keep harping on this movie because I actually kind of like it, or at least find it mildly entertaining, but they established very early in the movie, like, he goes to the doctor, and we see him walking with the cane, and he goes to the doctor and everything, and the doctor says, you have literally no cartilage in your joints.
None.
But they totally forget about that by the end of this movie. Like,
he puts on this fancy robotic thing on his knee.
Yeah. And he, kicks through solid brick.
Miraculously,
But even that, he doesn't even have that by the end of the movie. And, working out is not something that can fix that issue.
You have to have surgery.
To
fix that. Our band director in high school, her husband actually had an issue where his cartilage was gone in his knee.
Yeah.
They had to have cartilage from a cadaver taken out and replaced in his knee, so the bone wouldn't rub together, the joints wouldn't rub together.
Yeah, they just totally forget about that, and that bothers me too. But whatever.
We seem like we're trash in this movie, but it really isn't that bad.
And one more thing I did have an issue with is that so Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays a cop, and at the end of the movie it's like the big plot twist that he's Robin.
He's Robin.
Or a plot twist, it's a reveal, I guess, I don't know, but nobody else has ever figured out that Bruce Wayne is Batman except for, I guess, his girlfriend before she died.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and
Joseph Gordon-Levitt makes some amazing leaps in logic.
He does some extreme deductive reason. He's like, all right, I was an orphan, and I know how angry I got. Yeah. And when I saw you when I was a kid, I saw the same look that I always had on my face. So I just knew you had to be Batman. I'm like,
it's like, what?
How did he draw that conclusion? But freaking Commissioner Gordon, who's known this man literally his entire life and has been dealing with Batman for going on 10 years. It took him 10 years of Bruce Wayne being Batman before Batman says the line, a hero can be as simple as putting a coat on a young man's shoulders to let him know the world hasn't ended. And he's like, Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, it's like
it
what
took you
a
that
shocker.
long.
Yeah. Well, again, whatever.
I mean, like Selena Kyle, Catwoman. She figures it out immediately. She's like, oh, okay, he's Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
it's like a running inside joke between them. That he has got a powerful friend.
Yeah. So that whatever, I guess.
Whatever.
But I want to say some positive things about this movie. I like the themes that this movie tries to go for. Obviously they hit on the rich, and that the rich can be corrupt and everything. But this movie also does something that I think very few other Hollywood movies are willing to do. And I think it criticizes the people that want to tear the system down too. Because obviously Nolan goes to extreme lengths to show the anarchy that can happen when the system is torn down. So I want to compliment him for that. Visually, like all Christopher Nolan movies,
it's beautiful.
It's a beautifully filmed,
lots of IMAX sequences. Mm-hmm. The jump back and forth between the aspect ratios though can sometimes be jarring. There's a couple scenes where it flashes back and forth quite a few times, and you're like, all right, pick one. And some of the sequences he films with IMAX, I'm just like,
yeah,
why? There's a whole sequence where he's talking about where Michael Caine as Alfred is talking about how when Bruce Wayne was gone that 7 years before he came back to Gotham in the events of Batman Begins, that he would take a holiday to Venice, right?
Yeah.
And
or Italy or
somewhere, I think somewhere in Italy, and he filmed that in IMAX. I'm like, why?
Because Michael Caine is deserving of the IMAX. Okay. Now,
lots of beautiful cityscape shots filmed in IMAX that are gorgeous.
And speaking of that scene, I like, we see that towards the beginning of the movie, and I like that it comes back around, and I think it's actually a pretty heartfelt ending that he's, they all think he's dead. Obviously he's not. But, and then, the end of the movie is that, or right before the end of the movie, he takes that vacation and he sees Bruce Wayne with Selena Kyle there. Doesn't have the kids that he talked about, but pretty close to his vision. And then, of course, I even like the twist that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is Robin.
Or the subtle nod to Robin.
I don't think it was a setup for a sequel. I think it was just he wanted to end it on a positive note, and with the hope that Batman could still be out there. And I like that Nolan did
someone
that.
might maybe in his world someone else might take up that mantle or something.
Yeah, I like the way Nolan handled that. And again, the action sequences are cool. I love the practical. I mean, there's some CGI. I think the bat as they call it, not the Batwing, but the bat is CGI most of the time.
Definitely, his bat cycle or whatever.
Yeah,
it's CGI at times when it's tumbling to the side.
But I still think the dedication to practical effects and the quality of the CGI is still admirable.
It's still really good.
So
obviously, I'm sure there's some sort of CGI and digital effects to remove certain buildings from cityscapes because this was filmed largely in New York and Chicago. So
yeah, I like all that, and the plot, like all Nolan films, it's complicated. I think it's a little too complicated. I think we get a little too deep in the weeds with this plot about stealing his thumbprints so they can steal his authorized trades from his account and make him go broke, and then get the insider on the board to take over Wayne Enterprises so they can get his fusion reactor. It's very complicated.
Like this seems like very elaborate, just so you can steal a nuclear reactor and turn it into a bomb. So
and I mean,
the city to prove a point.
I appreciate Nolan going through all the details with this. I just feel like in a I hate to say it, this may sound condescending to superhero movies, but in a movie like this, especially when you're running 2 hours and 45 minutes, I think maybe he could have taken a couple shortcuts.
They're like, all right, guys, so listen.
but
I feel like probably what happened is Nolan walked in. He's like, all right, guys, I got about a 3.5 hour long. They're like, nah, 245 is what we got.
245,
He's
yeah.
Like, okay.
Because, I mean, even in 2012, that was long for a superhero movie.
2 hours and 45 minutes was long. I mean, Dark Knight in 2008, when it came out at a little over 2.5 hours, that's a long comic book movie. I mean, we didn't get a long MCU film until, like, a truly long MCU film until, like, Phase 3. They started being around that 2.5 hour mark. With like
Civil War being long.
Civil War was like the longest MCU film to date at 2.5 hours, and then we got obviously Endgame, which was right at 3.
Yeah.
But Christopher Nolan was ahead of the game. He's like in 2012. He's like, we got almost a 3-hour long movie here for Batman.
Yeah.
A singular character.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Batman
with all
and
that said,
Catwoman.
It's still a pretty entertaining movie, and I think it's still a halfway decent conclusion. I think the acting is still pretty good.
I love Tom Hardy as Bane. I have to say,
Tom Hardy is in Bane. It's I got to applaud Chris Nolan and his team for the way they filmed it too, because Tom Hardy's 5'9", he's my height.
Yeah.
And Christian Bale is 6 foot tall.
Yeah.
So that'd be like you and me, like duking it out.
Yeah, I think he does a very good job with camera
Obviously, they're
angles
in much better shape than we are.
Yeah, obviously, way better shape. I think they do a great job of making Tom Hardy look menacing.
Yeah, I think at certain times he's got like 3-inch lifts on his shoes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There are sequences I know they filmed with him standing on a box to make him taller, stuff like that.
Yeah. Whatever.
Subtle camera tricks, filming him from lower angles.
I know there's a lot of people that make fun of the mask and his voice. I like it. I think it works. There are times when it gets kind of mumbly and I can't understand what he's saying. But
the audio on this movie is very interesting because you'll listen to the rest of the dialogue, but somehow, I don't know if it's like maybe when this movie came out in theaters, it just wasn't as clear.
Yeah.
Because I saw the movie in theaters, but I don't remember seeing it in theaters in 2012. I mean, I saw it, but I don't remember the audio per se.
Yeah.
But on this 4K release up here, it's got a 7.1 audio track on it, and Bane cuts through way better than everything else. He's like so much more clear.
Yeah. I've heard that when they did test screenings for the movie, like
it was very mumbled, so they
people complained, and so he had to go back and redo the sound mix for Bane's voice because people just could not understand what he was saying.
But he just cuts through so much more clear than everything else.
But anything else you want to say about this movie?
I will say I don't care for the death sequence with Talia al Ghul marrying Quaytard. The way she dies is kind of like...
Yeah, she kind of goes...
She just goes... And I'm like...
It's kind of
I'm like, you're a good actress. I mean,
whatever. She did good up until that point. I don't know. Like, it feels like that was like the first take, and Christopher Nolan's like, okay, we're out of time.
Enough.
Let's go. Keep rolling. Whatever, I guess.
But overall, I mean, the acting's good all the way around. I mean, I still think that Christian Bale is a good Batman.
Yeah.
I like him as Bruce Wayne, too, in the moments he has to be Bruce
His
Wayne.
voice, when he's like... when he's beating up Bane at the end, that was funny. But,
I mean, there's a lot of lines that have been made fun of and memed to death out of this movie, like the "Where's the trigger" thing when he says that. Obviously, Bane's whole speech about darkness being.
I will say, I love Christopher Nolan as a writer of dialogue, but I think there's every character in every scene is giving some big grand epic speech, and it gets a little over the top.
Like Bane goes on like a whole like tour throughout the second act of like just making these big grand speeches in public places, and you're like, oh, all right.
I mean, everybody every character. I mean, almost every scene with them, they have some kind of big epic speech that was supposed to be, I think, some iconic line that Nolan was thinking when he wrote it, but It was what it is, I guess.
But I mean, overall, as much as it sounds like we've kind of trashed it, it's still a pretty good movie. Yeah. Definitely still really entertaining. Still a fun time.
Yeah.
And a pretty decent conclusion.
That being said, you ready for Buy It, Stream It, Skip It?
Go for it.
All right. Well, I'm gonna say, I was thinking about it as we were watching the movie. I'm still gonna say buy it because I think the trilogy as a whole, I think it is deserves to be bought as a trilogy. I think, it is definitely a trilogy. You see the rise of Batman, Batman Begins. You see, his like
him in his prime,
prime or whatever in The Dark Knight, and then you see or you could even say The Dark Knight is him falling from grace, and then you see his rise again, and then, you know, going out with a bang, I guess, or whatever, or creating that symbol of hope that will live beyond him in this film. Yeah, it's a flawed film. It's definitely not as good as its two predecessors. A big drop off, probably, you could say, from The Dark Knight. Lots of logic holes, plot holes, way too long. But that being said, I still think it's better than any DCEU film, I'm going to say. I think, you know, again, beautifully shot, pretty well acted for the most part. Great action sequences. I love the dedication, like I always say, that Nolan has for practical effects. I love Hans Zimmer's score in this movie. I think it might be my favorite. Like, if I were to put the soundtrack on for any of the three, I think I might pick this one first. I love Hans Zimmer's score for this film, and I think it complements the film really, really, really well.
Definitely.
It helps improve some really stupid sequences. But yeah, I think, you know, again, not as good as its predecessors, but I still think it's worth buying on Blu-ray, 4K, whatever
you got.
You got.
I agree. I think it's definitely worth the buy. This is like the fourth iteration of this trilogy I've owned. I think I've owned this trilogy on every format that it's ever been released. I've owned it on DVD, Blu-ray, now 4K. I've owned all digital copies of all of them at one point in time. So definitely one of my favorite trilogies. I definitely do think this is a big step down from especially The Dark Knight. But overall, I mean, I think it's still a pretty decent movie. Still really entertaining. It's got great moments, beautifully shot, great score. It does have a lot of logic problems and flaws that you kind of just have to accept just to enjoy the movie. But overall, I mean, it's still a really fun time. I still really like it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, other than that, you know, all movies have been pushed back until
pretty much there's like literally nothing coming out until December, and we're not going to review The Croods. So
I'm not going to review Hubie Halloween either. So I mean, we can, but it's just going to be trashing
It's stupid.
Adam Sandler for
quick thoughts. It's dumb, but it's entertaining-ish.
I was telling Dylan, I said I was honestly mildly entertained for 45 minutes, and then I paused it to do something, and I saw that I had an hour left, and I was like,
oh.
But anyway.
But we will continue and finish out our Christopher Nolan trilogy. We still have Interstellar and Dunkirk to watch. Make sure you check out our review for Tenet, which is up now. Yeah. And then at some point in time, we'll have new content.
Maybe
original, you know.
But we are putting out a weekly podcast called Stomp This Way, in which we review a giant monster movie, a different one every week. So if you want to hear us talk about giant monster movies, definitely check us out over there.
What's the name of that?
I think I said it.
Did you?
I think I said.
I don't know.
I think I said it was Stomp This Way. Stomp This Way. You can find it on anywhere you find podcasts, I guess. But other than that, I think we are up on social media.
Yeah, we're up on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're at DNA Film Reviews on all those platforms. So make sure you give us a like or follow. Be sure to tell your friends about us.
That's right. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.
Absolutely.
And we will see you next time.
Catch you later.